What we are told at 14. The Koslo family farm had 300 acres, and it felt huge to us. I, Doug, the youngest, my two older siblings, Mark and Mary, Mom and Dad and Grandpa, filled up the old house. We handled it like normal farm kids, chores before school. Then there were the after-school chores, working most of Saturday, dirty under the nails and thinking nothing of it. There was just one piece of land that we never worked. 25 acres of swamp in the back corner where the Black River made a slow bend, and it was too swampy to work. There was a birch visible from the house in that corner that would sometimes shake when there was no wind. The corner you did not hunt, the corner you did not cut wood from. Mom and Dad and Grandpa didn't talk about it too much when we were small. But they said, "Do not play in the swamp, and if the birch shakes in that corner, call the dogs, tie them up, and come in. If you smell something like a skunk, only muddier, and it goes through your nose and into your teeth, come inside." Later, when I turned 14, they told me why. We sat around the kitchen table that sloped a little because it was so old. Dad poured cider into jelly glasses, and Mom kept her hand on my shoulder like she was steadying me on a ladder. Grandpa spoke plainly, like there was a script in front of him and he was reading from it. He said, "Living in that swamp is something unusual." He did not say, "monster." He did not say it was a legend. He said a real thing that likes to be left alone. "It thinks all this is his," he said, and he touched the map of the farm with one thick finger, the fields and the hedgerows, and the lane that we used to get to the far fields. "It thinks the farm is a place it owns, but there is an agreement. We made it a long time ago. Every full moon we bring a quarter of a steer, or half a pig, with a few quarts of cider and honey. We set it on the old cedar board by the fence. It takes it, and in return it leaves us be, and it looks out for us." He looked at me to be sure I was hearing him. "It protects us," he said, "and in return, we leave it alone. That is how it has been for 5 generations. Mom said the crop yields always came in a little better than our neighbors, even in a dry year. Dad added that in 1977, some thieves tried to make off with Grandpa's tractor, and the truck they used came back on a wrecker with its windows broken and a smashed tailgate, because something hit it with rocks the size of turkeys and did not miss. The sheriff found the thieves later, a mile down the road, stunned and babbling about what happened. Grandpa tapped the map again. "Never go near the swamp," he said to me, "especially not on full moons. The creature is more likely to be by the fence then." I said yes. I meant it. All of us had heard about the smell. None of us had smelled it then. Grandpa leaned back and looked at the birch through the window. It was still, white and scarred, the paper like bark ready to peel. For a second, I thought I saw it give a tiny shiver, or maybe not. I did not ask. I did not want the truth in words just then. I had it in the way their voices had changed, and that was enough. The night everything changed. January set in with the strange brightness of snow. The air went flat and hard. Mom and Dad had saved for a week in the Caribbean for years. Tickets on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a cow. The plan was simple. Grandpa would stay with us, he would take the offering on the full moon, and we would continue with our normal routine. Problem solved. But you know how plans go. Grandpa's heart stuttered on him the day after they left. He knew what it was, and he did not scare easily, but he let Mary drive him to the hospital. They kept him overnight for observation. Mary and Mark, being teenagers, started calling their friends for a party as soon as Grandpa was admitted. They told me I could have one beer if I kept my mouth shut and stayed out of the way. I would have kept my mouth shut without the bribe. The party in our house was something from a movie. The living room full of kids from school, loud music, a little smoke in the downstairs bathroom, even with the window open and the fan on. The good couch pushed back, and the lamp we were never supposed to touch stuffed behind the chair so nobody would knock it over. The snow outside made the air bright enough to see the birch. I did not check. I did not want to check. The house pulsed with music and voices. Mary says I'm mixing it up in my memory, that she only had 3 drinks, and that the bottle was already empty when she found it. But I remember the way she stood at the window at midnight, her finger touching the glass like a kid pointing out a deer, brimming with laughter. "Look," she said, pointing at the shaking tree. "A supernatural phenomenon," her words slurring together. She meant it as a joke to her friends. She did not mean it for Mark. Mark heard. Mark was 16, and that means nothing you say to him can stand up to the thing in his chest that wants to be tested. "There is a thing back there," he said, "and it is a giant jerk." He staggered into his room and came out with the shotgun like he was on a mission. He had the shells in a tin. His fingers fumbled to load the gun, and then they didn't. He went to the hallway window, the one that looked over the back field, opened the old window, and let the winter creep in. He fired 3 times into the bright dark at the shaking tree. The sounds of the shotgun blasts instantly halted all conversations, and only the music continued in the house. The next thing we heard was the howl. It started low and made the hair rise on our arms as it climbed, and then it cut off so clean I could hear the echo bounce and go flat. We were quiet. Then we heard the crack. The birch snapped in the middle and fell. I saw it from the window, the white trunk in 2 pieces, the top half laying on the ground, unnaturally, next to the trunk. People left after that. They had every reason. The smell started to come in even before the last car backed out of the drive. That smell, the swamp plus skunk plus something that made you want to hold your breath. The dogs in the back turned circles and whined. My heart thumped too hard in my throat. Mark wiped his lips with the back of his hand like he had eaten something bitter. When the last taillight dropped off down the lane, the house felt larger, like something had taken a step back so it could see all of us at once. The feeling in my stomach was a cold hand gripping and letting go. I looked at Mark and did not recognize his expression. He looked older, or maybe he was trying to make his face into a shape that would fit what he had done, and he was doing a bad job of it. He did not apologize. He looked like he was waiting to be called for something terrible. Offering rejected. Mourning has a way of pretending it can fix things. We cleaned like we were going to rebuild the world with a mop and a trash bag. Grandpa called. The doctor released him home. He asked how things were and I said fine. And Dad's voice came out of Grandpa's mouth when he said, "Put your sister on the phone." And Mary went gray under her freckles and handed it back to me. When Grandpa stepped out of the truck and looked across the field, he saw the split birch and put one hand on the hood like he felt his age all at once. I walked toward him talking as if explanation could plug a hole in a boat. He did not look at me. "Get in the house," he said. That was all. We went like we were being pulled on a rope. "You better hope this works," Grandpa said, and his voice had more gravel in it than I had ever heard. He did not waste breath on a lesson. He went to the pantry immediately and took the quartered pig from the downstairs freezer, the jars of cider, the honey that Mom kept for baking. He set them on the tray he always used for this. The tray was old cedar, worn smooth in the center. He put it on the wagon of the 4-wheeler and drove it out and set it by the fence where he always set it and came back quickly. I watched him back in the window. He never moved like an old man. He did then. We waited. The house made small noises. The dogs twisted their collars and their chains clinked. It came in the afternoon, the howl like a horn blown inside a cave. And when we went to see, there was the tray out in the field where something had thrown it. The meat and cider and honey splashed and ruined. Grandpa left it where it fell and said the smell of that terrible swamp musk was so thick it felt like you could put your hand into it and come out with it on your palm. "Tie the dogs in the front," he said. "Do it now." He did not say why. We did not ask. Night came, heavy and slow. The smell thickened until it felt like a fog inside the house. The birch, or what was left of it, stood white in the moonlight like bone. We heard the howl again. Then the offering itself came arcing in at the kitchen window. The quarter pig slammed into the glass and shattered it and slid down wall. Mary covered her mouth. I put my hands on the counter and could not feel them. The dogs went insane and the chains rattled against the porch posts. I wanted to go back 2 nights and catch Mark by the shoulder when he walked past me. The next thing was the rock. It hit the wall below the hallway window, and I felt the floor shift. The sound it made was the sound of 2 cars hitting head-on. When I got my breath, I went upstairs to look and saw the stone in the snow. It was the size of a microwave, the kind that takes 2 hands to carry. 50 pounds if it was anything. There were no footprints I could see. The snow looked untouched. That was worse than if it had been stomped down. The smoothness of it made the hairs on my neck stand up. "We need to get out of here," Grandpa said. He did not shout. He whispered, like the walls would pass it on if he talked louder. "I will go unlock the garage and pull up by the side door," he said. "I have never smelled this smell so thick and heavy." Mary choked out, "You cannot go out there." He gave her a look I had seen him give an angry bull once, a look that meant stubborn meets bigger stubborn. "Do you have a better idea?" he asked. When nobody spoke, he told us what he believed, not like a sermon, like a man who has counted every nail in his barn and knows how many are bent. "It is transactional," he said. "We feed it, it gives us good crops. We leave it alone, it leaves us alone. I did not shoot at it. I have obeyed the rules for 76 years. That might count for something." He was not asking us to bless him. He was telling us what he had decided to do, period. He went to the side door. He opened it a crack, and the smell hit like heat. He went down the steps. He crossed the space to the garage in 10 slow steps, a man who was keeping his head down and not making sudden moves. He put his hand on the garage door. He started to lift it. The rock came from the right, and it did not just hit him. It burst into him and folded him into the far frame of the door with a sound that will never leave me. I have heard bats hit baseballs. I have heard a cantaloupe drop from a truck bed. This was both and neither. He did not make a sound after. He did not get up. We stepped forward without thinking. The cold bit, and I did not feel it at all. Mary made a noise like a siren, and then stopped dead like she had swallowed the rest of it to be brave. We searched for something to do, and there was not a thing. Grandpa's eyes were open, but they did not have anyone behind them. The smell was so thick I was afraid it would stick to me forever. The creature. Mark did not cry out. He said no, just no, hoarsely, and barely audibly. He grabbed his shotgun and loaded 5 shells and stuffed a few more into his jeans, and before we could get our hands on him, he went out the door, shirtless under his coat, his breath making steam that whipped sideways, and vanished. "Where are you?" he yelled at the dark. "Show yourself! Now!" I opened the hallway window out of instinct and yelled down, "Keep moving so he cannot hit you with a rock." "Good idea, Doug," he shouted. "Try to hit me now, you coward," he yelled into the darkness. He ran and fired at the places in the dark that were not quite dark. It is hard to explain how different the dark is when it contains a living thing. The shadows have depth. He shot, and the sound blasted out across the field and echoed back. Then I saw it, and when I say saw, I do not mean like you see a neighbor on the road and can decide to wave or not. I mean my eyes had to be convinced to deliver something to my brain. The thing moved from under the overhang of the roof. It was a black shadow made of swamp, ferns and grass and old leaves and shredded bark with something wet like riverweed. And even with the bright snow, it was impossible to lay a clean outline on it. It moved fast, not like running, like the distance changed to suit it. It was on Mark before I had time to say his name. It bear hugged him and twisted. That is the phrase that lives in my mind for it, but that wasn't exactly what happened. But for ease of communication, the creature bear hugged, twisted him. There was a sound like a green stick being broken. Then Mark stopped moving. His head fell forward, and he dropped the shotgun that had got him into all this trouble in the first place. It then turned and went toward the swamp, and was gone as quickly as it appeared. Like distance did not work on it the way it works on us. Mary was in the doorway when it happened. She took a step into the yard, and then stopped. She knew when bravery would not change anything. The smell had worked into the back of my throat like an actual hand trying to gag me. I stood there with my hands on the windowsill, watching the dogs in the front yard lay flat, their eyes rolling white. I heard Mary say my name. We did what people do. We called. We walked the edge of the swamp with flashlights, and our breath heavy, and our words hitting the ground in front of us. We said Mark, as if he would answer from behind a tree, embarrassed and angry. We went to the fence and did not cross it. Mary said his name the way you say a prayer you have not said since you were a child. I went to the place where the thing had been, and there were no footprints that made sense. There was just a churned up section in the snow. I know I am supposed to say that the worst part was losing Mark. It was. But there was another worst part that lived in the same room with that one. The part where I knew that the thing had been protecting us, and that it had a role, its own mission, and that our rules were not its rules, and that we had broken an agreement that had kept my family fed and whole for generations. It was not my fault, but it did not matter. What did matter was that the birch shook to remind us of our agreement, and we had broken our side of an oath. Ledger. We did not sleep. I do not mean we tossed and turned. I mean sleep was a thing for other people. The house had that Sunday morning after church quiet, only it was deep night and the quiet was palpable. Toward dawn, the smell thinned and thinned until I started to doubt that it had ever been there, and then I would catch it again in the curtains, and I wanted to tear them down and burn them in the fire pit. Dad called from the island and we did not pick up. What could we say? Would a connection hold what we needed to put across? We waited until he called Grandpa and left a message, and then we called him back and I said, "Come home." He said, "Why?" I said, "Grandpa is gone." He did not speak for a long time, before he said anything else, and I said, "Mark is gone too." He said the thing that dads say when there is nothing to say. He said, "We are on the way," which is not an answer, but is everything. We made the offering again the next full moon. Dad said it would clean slate. Those were his words. He said the pine next to the dead birch shook that night, and then was still. He said the tray was empty by dawn, and the dogs slept all night like logs. He said we had paid, and it had been accepted. He needed to believe that. I needed to believe that, as much as he did. None of us saw Mark again. There is no easy way to communicate that. There is only the emptiness of when we sit down to dinner and do not set a place for him. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing.